Hey, you're listening to aRDists, the podcast for creative people who do too much and refuse to niche the fuck down. I'm Sarah, an artist, dietitian, and chronic project starter. Let's catch up and have a little studio chat. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about fear, specifically the fear of waste. Something that's been coming up for me is kind of noticing my fear around wasting art supplies, hoarding art supplies. And so what I've been noticing is kind of a fear of wasting more expensive art supplies, more professional art supplies, and concern over things being a finished product at the end rather than just going through the creation process, which, you know, when you think of art, most people, when they go see art, it's a finished product. So there's, unless you're deep diving into a specific artist's, techniques and watching videos of them create, mainstream, you kind of just see the end product. You don't always see the creation process, especially for older works of art. You know, we get to go admire the finished product, but we missed out on kind of all of the ideation process leading up to starting on that finished piece, or the iterations that the artist went through prior to, getting to that finished piece again. And so when I create, or when I'm thinking about creating something, I have this idea and this fear of like putting pen to paper because I don't want to waste the art supplies. I don't want to use a really good piece of paper or take up space in a really nice sketchbook because I don't want to waste those materials. And that's frustrating and a really annoying kind of mindset to be in. A little kind of like anecdote that I think back to is when I was in high school and the teacher said, "Oh, go get, a sheet of paper from the closet and we're going to work on whatever the hell we were working on." And I think my friend and I were like one of the last people to get them, and there was one last sheet of paper that had like a footprint on it. Like it had fallen on the floor, somebody stepped on it, and then it got put back on the shelf. And so I got stuck with the one with the footprint. And my initial response was like, damn it, I got stuck with the one with the footprint. But she kind of said, haha, yours is dirty. Now you have to work with that. Just kind of busting my chops. And then I, snapped back with like, well, my piece is already started for me. Such a snot. But, kind of embracing the imperfection in the material. So it doesn't have to be like, like thinking about that now, like it doesn't have to be a damaged piece of expensive drawing paper. It could be, a piece of newspaper. It could be a piece of junk mail. It could be a napkin, the packing material that you get in a, shipping box or whatever. It could be cardboard. Kind of, if I'm having so much trouble getting started on, like a canvas or a nice sketchbook, then get a shitty sketchbook. I have a flyer just from some junk mail that I got, so I'm just gonna do a little bit of illustration while I talk through this. But let's switch over to, do I want to do this way? Is this better? Or do we like to see me partially? I don't know. I'll do split screen. We'll see how split screen goes. So I have these old oil pastels. It's Marie's brand. I don't think it's a particularly expensive set. Based on the illustration on the front, it kind of looks like kids' materials. So, I don't know. The point is, I'm using junk, basically, and some old, can be inexpensive materials. And I want to kind of go through some iteration, or an iteration of idea that I had. There's this illustrator, or not illustrator, what am I saying? There's this sculptor, I think you could classify him as, or mixed media artist, that I have seen on Instagram who does these like 3D sculpture things that are very textured, and they use a lot of black and like bright, almost fluorescent or like neon or just like really pigmented bright colors. And sometimes the pieces kind of remind me of organic shapes that you might see in intestinal lining. Like that's what it makes me think of, is like the textures and like peaks and valleys of like intestinal folds and things like that. So I wanted to play around with a 2D version today. So that's what I'm going to be doodling kind of on the side. So if you're not watching this on YouTube and you're just listening, you'll miss out on the visual aspect of today's episode. But I will still be talking just about this topic of material waste and the, I guess, stagnation that can happen with too much worry over materials and things like that. Yeah, and one thing I want to kind of go back to is the concept of what is art. And I think this is green. This isn't even the color that I want. What is art? So, like I said, a lot of times we see finished pieces of art and we don't get to see the process, but the vast majority of art is the creation process, not the finished product. So you might spend 90% of your time in the ideation, so, like researching and exploring and, doing different iterations of the piece on scrap material before you get into the final piece. Or you might start on what will be the final surface and then decide to scrap it, paint over it, and, start again. So for myself, I just broke this. For myself, I need to remind myself that, the finished product is only part of it. So lower the pressure on starting and do more of the exploration. Like, be more curious and worry less about materials and getting it right the first time. Like, I think that's kind of the main thing. This looks sus. Okay, let's change things up a little bit here. But yeah, thinking back to that kind of story from when I was in high school, in that moment, I was being kind of like a little whatever, but I embraced the, imperfection in what I was starting with. And, I don't think I ended up like using the foot. I didn't end up using the footprint in the final piece, but I just, drew over it. It was just the idea that, if you're starting with something imperfect, that's okay. Like, you don't have to spend tons of money on art supplies, and you don't need to have expensive art supplies to get started. I'm literally just going through an iteration process on junk mail. So if that's a helpful kind of mindset to talk through for anyone else, I'm hoping this episode is, supportive in your process. So the other kind of topic on this is the fear aspect, like economic fear. We live in a very, how do I describe it? Like, we're very caught up in, I feel like, hustle culture right now. So if you start on something, there's this kind of like go, go, go mentality. Like, you need to create something for the purpose of making money. And that's not always a very healthy mindset when it comes to making art, because not everything you start is going to be for financial gain. like I said, I don't know, like 90%. I'm just throwing out a percentage, not based on any scientific information. 90% of what you do is going to be process, and only 10% is going to be on product, like creating the finished product. So like I said, there's the research phase, there's the exploration phase, there's the different iterations before you even dive into the final piece. And I think with hustle culture, there's less emphasis on the creation process and more on just pumping out final products. And so there's that pressure to create for the sake of selling, and creating not for yourself and more for who is going to buy this and who am I creating for, more about the potential buyer as opposed to creating art for the sake of creating art, which can really snuff out your creative flame. And again, puts more pressure. It's like, I don't want to get started until I have a clear idea of what this is going to be, or I know like who I'm going to sell it. Is this worth doing if I'm not going to sell it? And so weeks, months, years can go by without creating anything. And it's like one of my biggest fears is regret. I don't want to find myself in 5, 10, 20 years regretting all of the indecision, like the lack of action in actually creating something. So yeah, I would say fear of regret is kind of a motivating factor, but I also don't want to create out of fear. That's not helpful either, but it's definitely a motivator. Like, get in the studio, make something, take action. It doesn't have to be perfect. I might never reach the level of Picasso, and that's okay. But I would regret for myself personally getting to my deathbed and not having some body of work that I can at least look at and admire myself and appreciate that I went and did. Yeah. Kind of along the lines of the financial aspect, again, with like hustle culture and with the need to create with a buyer in mind and that sort of a thing. Again, not wanting to waste materials, like good materials and that sort of a thing. There's less of a, tiered system in the sense of like, okay, if I had some sort of financial slip, like job loss, sickness, some unexpected debt, it's like a cliff. There's not as much of a safety net. And instead of tumbling down a few steps, you, again, drop off a cliff financially. Things are not stable. So again, it kind of plays into that fear of using materials that are a little bit more expensive, or again, needing to make money off of art. And it's like, if this isn't going to make me money, it's not worth my time. But again, the fear of getting to the end of my life and not having created is definitely a motivating factor to do it. Just do it. Might not make me money. Might not sell anything. But at the same time, it's not all about that. It's just that society and money, capitalism, is in direct kind of competition with that. But yeah, I didn't go to art school. I took a handful of classes while I was at university, and I'm sure they probably help you kind of break down that fear of wasting materials, because you just have to like pump out things as you work through processes and stuff. As someone who didn't go to school, I kind of have to learn those lessons on my own. And one class that I do kind of reflect back on is a figure drawing class. So we had charcoal and big sheets of like sketch pads of newsprint, so pretty inexpensive fabric, brain dead. So pretty inexpensive paper. And what we would do is we had the model in the center of the room. We would sketch them and then use a cloth of some kind, wipe off what we just sketched. They would change into a new pose. We'd sketch them for another like 30 seconds, wipe that pose clean off of our well, semi-clean. Draw them again, wipe it clean, draw them clean, or, you know, wipe it clean, draw them again, wipe it clean, draw them again, and do that over and over and over again. And that definitely reduces some of the attachment that you have to, like, again, not everything that you create, pen to paper, pencil to paper, whatever, is going to be a finished product. It is about the process. It is about repetition, constant iteration, and creating it over and over and over again until you know, refine your technique and that kind of a thing. So again, using inexpensive materials like newsprint and charcoal and not getting overly attached. That is another topic. Just getting overly attached to works. So I always think back to my high school experience and thinking about what's his name? Oh my God, why am I blanking on his name? Very famous artist. Andy Warhol. Could not think of it. Andy Warhol, and visiting the Andy Warhol Museum and how it still clings to me, the idea of like keeping everything. So like Andy Warhol Museum, I remember seeing like sketchbooks, little doodles, like every little piece. And part of me feels like that's a very narcissistic thing to, you know, keep everything of mine with the idea that maybe one day people will want this in a museum and to look at it. Like hoarding every scrap, every little piece of whatever that I've done with the hope that one day people will care enough about what I did to want to put it in a museum and take up space and, you know, thousands of people to visit it. So what's my point here? I also have this like hoarding kind of mentality as well of like, I keep everything I've done. I've played with the idea of doing more like junk journals. So I have a lot of little doodles and sketches, and I'm sure I have some around here somewhere, but my fingers are kind of nasty. I don't want to pick anything up. Taking little, like any like little sketch or doodle that I had, cutting it out and putting it in a junk journal and saving that. And I think there is value in keeping some things, but keeping everything is a little ridiculous. And I don't know, I'm kind of getting a little off topic from what I wanted to talk about. It is a little bit related to waste, but so again, I'm kind of sharing this because it's a mindset that I'm working through, and maybe it's something that you've also struggled with. Just the idea of not wanting to waste materials, fear of getting started, but knowing that you can work with inexpensive materials. It doesn't have to be a finished piece always. Again, reinforcing the idea that not everything needs to be a finished piece, and biggest thing is the journey, not the destination. So it's about the creative process, less so about the finished product. Not everything is going to be a finished product. Another thing is not every idea is worth pursuing. I feel like hundreds of ideas, and again, going back to like sketchbooks, even putting them down in sketchbooks, I'm like, oh, I need to have like a specific sketchbook for this, or I need to save this for, you know, I don't want to sketch this out. I just want to do the thing, or it's not even worth pursuing. So why even put it down on paper? It's like, just get it down. It's good to, you know, brain dump ideas and then come back to them later, or don't. The understanding is that it's satisfying that kind of creative need to get an idea out and then work through it later if you decide it's worth pursuing. Not everything is worth pursuing. Like, I have hundreds of ideas and probably hundreds of them are bad or just not worth pursuing at that time. Maybe they'd be worth pursuing some other time. Maybe they'd be worth passing along to somebody else that they can do. But not all ideas are good ideas. What do we think? I'm working on this. I'm covering up quite a bit of the Milwaukee ad. These pastels are pretty good. But yeah, I like the kind of like neon whatever. This isn't the material I would choose. I don't really like oil pastels. But see, this is a good exercise in figuring out materials that I would use for this should I decide to pursue it at another time. Whoops, wrong color. But did you see how easy it was for me to just get started and putting pastel on paper when I know that these aren't, hundreds of dollars or like $10 a stick or anything like that. And this was literally free paper. So I didn't have that like hesitancy of like, oh, where do I start? Where do I put my, it's just getting started and trying. Yeah. So this is a practice for me. If it was helpful for you, I hope you also, get out some junk mail or newspaper or, some crumpled up piece of tissue, whatever, and make something today. If you have a sketchbook that you haven't picked up in years, or don't pick it up often enough, pick it up and sketch out some idea. Just date it, sketch out something, write a couple notes for yourself, and close it and be content with the fact that you put pen to paper and got it out of your brain, and it's not just like sitting in there. It's out. It exists in the world. It's real. And if one day you decide to pursue it, awesome. If not, that's okay. But yeah, I think that's most of what I wanted to cover with that. There's obviously stress over the cost of art supplies, but use what you have. And if that's, going into your fire pit outside or walking the beach and finding some pieces of burnt wood and using that as charcoal, and then getting a piece of paper out of the trash bin, or again, a piece of junk mail or something, use that. If you want to make something sculptural, use some sticks and pine cones. And there's this reminds me of we've been doing a lot of work outside, and our ground is very like clay heavy. Our soil sucks. Once it gets to this like summer season, it's hard as a rock and like impossible to dig through. But then wintertime and like rainy season, it's squishy, mucky, absolute mess. But while I was digging, I came across a section that was very, it looks like very clean, like gray clay. So I set that aside, and I kind of want to see what I can make out of it. So literally just find shit around you. Like, it doesn't have to be from an art supply store as I sit here drawing with art supplies, but you know what I'm saying. Maybe I can do another episode where we just use materials from outside my house and we make something. So with that, this is my iteration of this doesn't look good on camera. Hang on. I need to keep going. We need more depth. I really don't like oil pastels. I feel like it needs more black and more depth and less pink. But if this was interesting to you or useful, or you have any additional thoughts or motivating factors that help you get out of the overthinking, not putting pen to paper, or getting over the fear of wasting materials, drop your suggestions and comments and all those things below in the comment section. And if you're not already subscribed, subscribe. I appreciate it. It lets me know that you're obviously interested in the nonsense that I have to say. I hope you don't have a fear of waste like I do. I also have a fear of not fear, but I just concerns over waste in general, and I don't want to contribute to the landfill excessively. So this does not look good. Well, I mean, it is only pastels on junk paper, so I don't feel too bad about it. All right. Well, that's all I got for today. I hope you have a great whatever day it is, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Thanks for listening to aRDists Podcast. If you like this episode, share it with a fellow creative goblin and hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Now go make some shit, and I'll see you next time.